So if you know anyone who was not able to make it today, please let them know that we are recording this and they should be able to access the recording if they just like reach out and let us know they want to. But yeah, all right. Thank you so much for coming today. This is meant to be really informal. Just want to introduce you to some of the work we've been doing, let you know some of the logistics, what you would do if you wanted to get started, and of course, like answer any questions. So we are called eSTEAM. This is our beautiful logo that we came up with. And our mission statement is that we're connecting with incarcerated students through STEAM education. And as of like a month or two ago, we are now funded by Autodesk, which is I think internet or just national software company.
International.
International software company. So jot that down. But they've generously given us $10,000 to fund some of our efforts, including reimbursing some of our transportation costs and stuff like that. We'll get into that more later. Okay. So when we say eSTEAM, this is an acronym we came up with that we kind of forced. It's a little painful, but it stands for Education and Science, Technology, Engineering, Astrobiology, and Mathematics. So usually the A in STEAM is like arts, but for us, no, it's astrobiology. And so I already introduced myself. I'm Samantha, third year PhD student in astronomy. My fellow third year PhD student in astronomy, Hector Delgado Diaz, also came up with this idea with me. He's not here today, but he is very much a co-founder. And then Lupita introduced herself, Lisa introduced herself, Greta's not here, but she's a fourth year PhD student in atmospheric sciences. And then of course we had Pete and Megan introduce themselves as well. All right, so the main goals are to provide tutoring in STEAM subjects to incarcerated students, to act as role models through meaningful one-on-one mentor-mentee relationships with these students, to build long-term and short-term post-release plans with incarcerated students, and lastly, to inspire incarcerated students to explore careers in STEAM. And so the students that we work with are at a facility called Echo Glen Children's Center. It's like an official institution affiliated with the state of Washington, like Department of, I forget, Children, Youth, and Families, I think is what the DCYF stands for. And they brand themselves as like a rehabilitative institution, but really it's a prison. It's a prison for children. And a lot of kids get sent there when they get in trouble with the law for various things. We're not supposed to ask them about it. They're not supposed to talk about it. But generally they've been sentenced to go here by a judge in a court proceeding. And so I guess they can have up to 155 residents. As of when they put this information online, they had 101, where the boys are aged 11 to 17, and then there are girls aged 13 through 25, so also some adult women as well. And so, got something in the chat. Okay, yes, also, thank you so much, Megan. If any of my teammates would like to chime in, just like raise your hand so I can see you, and then definitely just like, you should say stuff. You should absolutely chime in, because I know I'm gonna forget stuff. But yes, as Megan put in the chat, it is medium to maximum security. And what that means is that it's divided into different cottages, and the different cottages have different security levels. So there's a maximum security cottage where Pete has worked before. And as you can imagine, because it's maximum security, they're not allowed access to computers. They are generally limited access to a lot of things. They're really not supposed to be in the room with each other. And so that's kind of what the maximum security cabin is, or cottage is like. Whereas the other cottages, it feels more like a typical classroom setup. And so while most of the kids are at Echo Glen, they need to finish their high school education. And so there are 17 core credits they need to complete, and then what they call 3 personal pathway requirements. So in general, they need to take 4 English classes, 3 math classes, 3 science classes, 1 career and technology class, 2 health and fitness classes, 1 art class, and then for their personal pathway requirements, 1 art and 2 world languages, or 3 credits determined by their high school and beyond plan. which is another sort of like paperwork formality they have to go through while they're at Echo Glen, where they have to like think about what their career goals are, what their next steps for pursuing that career would be, like going to a college or technical school or what have you. And that's sort of part of like their long-term post-release plan that they formally have to complete while they're at Echo Glen. And so do we have this on here? Yes. So I want to go back actually, and the Google slides are advancing weird. So, but the big thing to mention here is that they complete most of these classes on a program called Edgenuity. And if you've ever done a class online, it's just like all of the, you know, negatives and downsides that come with doing an online class. And so that can be really challenging for them, especially because in the lower security classroom settings, sometimes there is a teacher teaching a lesson to some of the students while other students are doing their lessons online. And so it gets really rowdy and distracting, and it can be really hard for them to focus. They're not allowed to Google due to security reasons, as Megan mentioned, which can also make things really challenging. And then to top it all off, some of their lessons are in the form of videos. And so they can't even really listen to the video while there's so much distraction and noise going on in the classroom. So there's definitely a lot of unique challenges that they face in trying to finish their course requirements. So the courses we've provided tutoring so far include financial math. So usually math in the context of like calculating your taxes based on, you know, whatever your, I forget what it's called, but like if you have 2 children, what would your taxes be based on your salary and things like that. And then geometry, biology, Spanish, language arts, health and wellness, and then of course, career and post-release advising, where we try to talk to the kids about what they're excited about, what they think they want to do when they grow up, and how to get there in the future.
Sam, I want to jump in and stress your point again, that these classes that they're completing, you know, they don't really have like the same school background as all of us. And so the things that, you know, the materials that they're engaging with and reading about, like Sam sort of came up with an example there for financial math, not really applicable to their lives or especially their current life, where the questions like you're going on vacation somewhere, blah, blah, blah. So all these things are not already tailored to them. They're kind of like square peg, round hole. And then the maximum security students, as Sam said, have even less material, rely on paper packets solely with a pencil and calculator. So sort of how we might think about checking in with ourselves or our own answers or sort of how we're completing these things, they don't really have a lot of those options. So.
Right. Thank you so much, Pete. And then Megan also added these online classes are not designed for an incarcerated audience. They assume a typical high school student. Yeah, and definitely, Megan, if you want to just like chime in, you absolutely should. Don't feel like you have to like relegate yourself to the chat. I'm totally cool with you.
Yeah, sorry. I just like add these afterthoughts, you know, like, oh, let me just mention, you know, and I don't want to interrupt. But yeah, these online classes are definitely not designed for an incarcerated audience. And like, I really want to stress that point about they can't Google, but it's so much more than that. Sometimes these online classes don't even come with like reference material. Like I was tutoring in health and wellness the other day, and a question came up and I was like, oh, I don't know this either. And I asked the kid, I was like, where's your like textbook and or lesson plan? And he's like, I don't have any of that. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much for bringing that up. So basically like every possible learning challenge you could imagine, these kids are facing. And so it's really, really hard for them to engage with learning, let alone like enjoying or like loving learning in this sort of context. And so we've been trying to support them by offering one-on-one tutoring. And so far we've gone in on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, where generally any given tutor will go in once per week. And we always go in pairs, just for like practical and like sort of like safety reasons. I worry about people driving on the highway early in the morning by themselves. So we go in pairs. And so our approach, because our audience is a unique audience, is also kind of unique. And we try to tailor it to our students based on our experiences so far working with them. And so the main thing is to offer consistent praise and encouragement, given all the challenges that they're facing. when they're trying to learn this material, it can be really discouraging. And so we try to, celebrate the little victories, let them know that we're proud of them at every chance that we get, just to try and counteract that a bit. Also, it's a bit weird because their progress isn't really tracked in the same way that, like, if you're an undergrad, your progress in a course would be tracked. Like, in the quarter system at UW, you're like, okay, we're in week 4. There's only like 5 weeks left of this course. We're close to the end. But for them, especially when they're working individually on these Edgenuity classes, there's nobody really like, tracking their progress or making sure that they're on a timeline or anything, which can make it really hard to feel motivated. Megan, go ahead.
You saying that like they're not getting their track progress made me think of reminding you guys of the fact that they have students of all different grade levels together in the same classroom. And so they're not even split up by grades. And a lot of the times, because of that, students that are not in the grade that is being focused upon on that particular day is pretty much just left to their own devices.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, because their priority is to organize the students based on security level, more than obviously like what their learning level is, which offers its own challenges too. Like you can't necessarily ask your neighbor for help if they're in a totally different learning stage than you are. But yeah, so they get like a little progress bar on their class on the Edgenuity that lets them know, like what percentage they've completed and what their grade is so far. But that can feel kind of nebulous to them. So we try to, say like, wow, you got 100% on that quiz. Like that's amazing. Or, stuff like that where maybe normally you wouldn't be focusing so much on every little achievement, but it means a lot to them because, how little like support and encouragement they're getting in general. And so another thing is that we also provide hands-on support by collaborating on each problem together. So if you've tutored before, it's probably true that you tried to go with more of like a Socratic method, trying to like, get your student to think more about the problem and see if they could get to the answer on their own. It's not that we don't think our students are not capable of that. It's just that, again, like they really need that extra love and support. And so rather than, trying to make them do something on their own and just like watch them squirm, we work on it together and really collaborate. So when my student's working on a math problem, I'm sitting next to them working on that math problem too. I've got a piece of paper, I've got a pencil out. We're going through each step together. And this is especially important because I think as Megan and Pete already mentioned, it's really unclear what background and skill level students are coming to this coursework with. So we've had students, who are supposed to be doing a financial math class, but didn't have a lot of confidence with, like basic multiplication and division. And so again, it's really, really helpful to not assume what they know going into a problem just based on the material they've been given, and to offer as much support as they need. Yeah, and so then another thing is that we try to make learning relevant and relatable. So like Pete and Megan already said as well, a lot of these classes are just not created with incarcerated students in mind. So for example, the financial math class focuses a lot on like they're saving money to go on a trip or like do this physical activity at a outdoor place that you can't access if you're literally incarcerated. And so it's the little things like that can feel really alienating to these students, and just make it even harder to engage with the material. So we try to make learning a little bit more relevant and realistic by, asking them, what's your favorite artist? Like, is there a musician that you wanted to see in concert? Like, maybe that would be expensive. Would you have to save and budget money for that? How would that work? And just try to like make things a little bit more relatable. And then lastly, I think this is actually the most important thing of all, which is that we're aiming to build trusting relationships by being a reliable mentor. And so what that means basically in essence is just showing up consistently, and really demonstrating a commitment to your student. And this is really important because, I'll let Pete chime in just 1 second. This is really important because again, like a lot of these students have been discouraged, especially in a classroom environment. Some of the teachers can be really strict. They've been told that they're bad kids, which is terrible. And they really internalize that. And so it's huge just to be someone who shows up for them and shows up for them consistently, even if you have a day where you don't get a lot done, or where your student wasn't feeling super good, or where, you know, they weren't super into what they were learning. The fact that you show up anyway the next week means a whole lot to them. Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, it, you know, almost doesn't matter a lick if you have experience in any of those classes that we mentioned before. Don't worry about that at all. Like, we're showing up and getting thrown into like, hey, we need someone to work on art history with this person today. In that way, the last 2 points that Sam mentioned are the most important, is being reliable and encouraging and showing up every week, and, you know, often embracing if you don't know the answer to something that you're working on alongside them, talking it out, and that they can see that you're, you know, an adult who's in college who also doesn't know how to do stuff is very helpful to them. There's not the kind of input that they've gotten before. So don't worry about like your own personal background knowledge. That's kind of a small piece of the pie that we're talking about.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, and the cool thing too is because we're coming from outside, we are allowed to use Google. So if you're in a classroom or in the library, we are allowed to Google things for them. So that gives them so much power, just so much more access to information than they would have if we weren't there. So that's another like very like literal material thing we can offer them. But yeah, and like Pete said, I think the most important thing when you don't know something, just be honest about it, because it is really a valuable thing to model for younger people. Just like, it's okay to not know everything. We'll figure it out together. And if not, it's not the end of the world. We know for next time. Okay, I think that covers the main points there. Sometimes even with the power to Google, firewalls will still prevent you from getting to the answer. Yes, so this is a really interesting lesson on just like the weirdness of teaching in a place like this. Megan, was this your story about working on the biology packet? Do you want to tell it?
Yeah, sure. That was pretty funny. I was working on this student's biology midterm with him, and we got permission for me to help him on his midterm. And one of the questions was, what is sexual selection and how is that different from natural selection? And y'all, we tried sexual selection, we tried reproductive selection, we tried selection due to reproduction. Like, we tried every possible combination, but the firewall was like absolutely nothing to do with sex in any way whatsoever.
Right, which is so crazy because like you're literally just trying to answer like an academic question on a midterm, but that's the sort of stuff that you're dealing with in an environment like this. And if you show frustration, I think that's okay too, because then they understand that someone sympathizes with how annoying it is to try to learn in a setting like this. All right, so moving on. All right, so the logistics for how we tutor at Echo Glen. So this facility is located in Snoqualmie, about 30 miles from UW campus. I forget which highway we take to get there. Is it usually like 520 or
I-90?
I-90. So it's not like an arduous journey or anything, but you know, it is a trip on the highway. And currently the way that we're doing this is transporting ourselves in personal vehicles, but we're also looking into trying to get like vans from UW that we can rent potentially. And so currently the way that this works financially is that drivers are being reimbursed for mileage and tolls based on using the University of Washington as the starting address. And that's just based on UW reimbursement policy. And so the time commitment is generally 3 hours once per week. And that includes driving to the facility and getting back. All right. So because this is a unique environment, I think it's helpful just to like paint a picture of what it's like when you get to Echo Glen. Don't worry about remembering any of this stuff. I just thought it would, you know, be helpful context. But when you go into Echo Glen, the first thing that will happen is you'll come up upon a security gate, and there will be a security guard standing there outside of their car, and they'll ask you to show your ID, so like a state ID or a passport. And then currently they would like to see proof of a negative COVID test taken the morning of your arrival. Just because, you know, COVID safety stuff right now, because they recently had a major outbreak. And so they were quarantined for a long time. So once you've gone past the gate, you'll park by what's called the health center, and they have a bunch of parking spots that are for visitors. Go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you at this exact second, but I just wanted to mention with the COVID stuff that we try to take it extra seriously because when these kids get quarantined, they're stuck in their cells for weeks on end. And so it's like a million times worse than one of us getting COVID and having to like stay home in our nice apartment for a couple of days.
Great question.
Sorry.
Debbie. Show that the test has been, or sorry, what, sorry, was someone asking something?
Yeah, I had a quick question. The first thing would be the COVID tests. When you get them like the morning of, so these are like the rapid like 15-minute tests basically. Okay. And do you like, is there an easy way to do that like on campus? Do you guys like all go together and get them, or do you like, what's the?
So let me try to, because Debbie asked a similar question as well. So let me try to hit both of your questions at once. And Debbie, just to say it out loud, asked, how do you show that the test has been taken the morning of? So full transparency, this is a new policy that we heard of as of last week because of this recent outbreak. So tomorrow, Pete and Lupita will be sort of like guinea pigging this new policy and we'll see how it goes. Generally, what we found is that Echo Glen is very disorganized. There's not a lot of communication. And so sometimes they'll like announce a policy like this, but it doesn't really have like the enforcement to back it up. So in a way, it's really up to you, you know, to like obey it in a weird way. But yeah, they haven't said anything about, you know, really proving that it was taken the morning of. And again, because of like the disorganization, I wouldn't imagine that they're going to enforce that super strictly. If they can see like a picture taken on your phone of a negative test and that the metadata says it was taken that day, I think they will accept that. That being said, again, like we haven't test driven this yet, but we will as of tomorrow morning. And then, I'm sorry, could you repeat what your question was? Oh, how do we get tested? Yes, sorry. Yeah, so again, because this is a new policy, we're still kind of figuring it out. We're hoping to figure out a way to get tests reimbursed by UW. I think our health insurance covers it based on something that Lupita said, like a certain number of tests. But yeah, I think for now, we are just gonna use the tests that we have here, but I would like to try and like create a pool that we can draw from so people don't have to dip into their personal testing supplies. I ordered a bunch online this weekend and I'd be willing to share some of those for sure. And again, like this is a policy that could go away really quickly, could come back really quickly just because of the way like things have been fluctuating in the pandemic in general. Like again, this is a new policy as of last week. We weren't having to do this a few weeks ago.
It's entirely possible too, as Sam said, how disorganized it is, that we could show up tomorrow and not hear a word about it. So we don't know.
Very inconsistent. Like sometimes when we show up at the gate and show our IDs, they'll ask if we're having COVID symptoms and then take both of our temperatures. Other times they don't ask if we're having symptoms. Other times they only take Megan's temperature and not mine. Like it's just super, super inconsistent. Usually in a way that's like bending towards a lack of strictness. It's a little more loosey-goosey than you might expect for an institution that is literally a prison. But yeah, so that's a weird thing. But great questions, everybody. And definitely like if you think of something, drop it in the chat, chime in, interrupt me, all good. So once you park by the health center in the visitor spots, you'll leave everything in your car except your ID, which you'll need to get a visitor badge inside, and your keys to the car in the car. And the biggest thing here is they really do not want any cell phones inside. Do not bring your phone inside. So they have lockers inside, and I was told also that they're going to get lockers for volunteers in the library too, if you wanted to bring your phone to that checkpoint and then leave it in the locker, but no phones when you're with the students. So I'll literally just like have my state ID in my pocket and my keys on my belt loop, and that's it. That's all I walk in with. And now also relevant to the current COVID policy, you need to wear a well-fitting N95 mask. They say that they have them available at check-in, but they've also been kind of inconsistent with this as well. Sometimes it's literally just a surgical mask, but also there's usually nobody like really enforcing it, which is, it's a weird thing, but again, very disorganized, not a lot of communication. So you've walked into the health center to sign in, and then you give them your ID, and they give you back your ID, but also a volunteer badge that you clip onto your clothes. And then they'll send out a security guard who will basically guide you through a metal detector, pat down your jacket, usually not your body unless, you know, something weird happens, but they've got a wand too, in case you go off in the metal detector, but that's generally also very chill. It's not like airport security. No one's like yelling at you. And then once you've gone through the metal detector, you'll go to the school library and meet either Laurel or Pam, who have sort of been our contacts at the school in the past. So Laurel is the guidance counselor basically at Echo Glen. And then Pam, I'm not sure what her official job title is, but she's basically becoming like the main volunteer coordinator. And it's nice to check in with Laurel or Pam at the start of the day, just so you can know like what's going on. So sometimes things will happen like there'll be, you know, like a fight in one of the classrooms or in one of the cottages. And that doesn't mean that we won't go into that classroom that day, but it's just helpful context to know that like, hey, like you're going to walk into a situation where maybe there's a little tension. And that's really helpful to know. Also, like if a cottage is unexpectedly on COVID lockdown, they'll help you figure out tutoring in a different scenario, or you can just ask, you know, how can I help out today? And so that's generally a good place to start. And then once you've talked to them and figured out where you're going, you'll go to your assigned classroom, or alternatively, sometimes the students will be sent to you in the library. So you'll just sit and wait for them until they get in there. If you're going to the classroom, there's always a teacher and a para, so an assistant teacher at all times. And that's because they have policies about not leaving students alone with just one adult. So there will always be multiple adults in the room. And generally, we don't interact with the teachers that much. They kind of just do their own thing. But the paras are really helpful because, you know, they have like iPads or laptops that you can use to Google stuff. And they're also just usually really friendly and nice. And then, yeah, at that point, you'll work with your student. And when you're working with your student, we try to let them lead the way because they know, you know, what they're supposed to be doing or what they're having a hard time with. And we just try to be flexible and go with the flow. So sometimes I'll show up and my student Sebastian is like, we got to work on financial math. So we'll work on financial math. Other days, he's like, my English teacher says that I'm too behind. So we'll work on English. Basically, whatever he feels like doing is what we work on. And that also helps a lot with keeping him engaged and not feeling like I'm also like an authority figure or something. Like I'm there to support him, do what he wants, not to tell him what to do. Okay. Also just wanted to note that if you're feeling a little iffy about this, if you want to dip your toe in the water first, there's an organization called the Friends of Echo Glen. They're basically a group of volunteers who show up at Echo Glen. And every month or so, they organize what's called a social. And so this is basically just a night where volunteers show up and you'll go to a cottage and you'll work on a specific craft that's been assigned for that social with the kids in that cottage. So we went to a social before we started tutoring there where we sewed pillows. I've heard they've made friendship bracelets and stuff of that nature in the past. Megan, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention too that you do not need to be background check cleared and like volunteer accepted to go to one of these socials. You can go to your first one for free. So like if you guys wanted to go like next week, I don't even know if there's a social happening next week, but if you wanted to go next week, like you could. There's no like barriers to that.
Yeah, and so that can be really helpful too. And I mean, so we all organized together and went to a social before we started tutoring. And it was just so helpful to like get the lay of the land, get introduced to like the weird process of like checking in, what the vibe is, how it's set up. It went a long way and just like making us all feel like a lot more like comfortable once we showed up there to tutor. So I think this could be a really great option. Especially for people who are thinking about joining to volunteer, and we could organize together to go to one whenever the next one comes up. Okay, so that's what we've been doing so far. I also just want to mention what some of our future plans are. We do have ambitions. So this summer, I think we are scheming on implementing more astrobiology related outreach, and that would, you know, depending on student and staff interest, but that's part of the advantage of going in and just providing the support that they ask for. We get to learn more about what their interests are, what kind of things they would like to see at Echo Glen. And then also I think it feels less like we're just like coming in and like forcing science onto them or something. It's like, it's much more of like a mutual relationship. And so we've talked to the staff about maybe having a stargazing event this summer, and people are really excited about that. We've talked a lot to the history teacher at Echo Glen, Mr. Doyle. So that's another thing. They don't have like multiple teachers and multiple grade levels. There's like a science teacher, a math teacher, a history teacher. And so that's also kind of an interesting dynamic. But in any case, we've talked to the history teacher. He was really excited about our research, the fact that we're scientists. He was interested in having us come and talk about like the history of astrobiology and all the social implications. So like we're getting a lot of like interest in what we do, which is really cool. So beyond this summer, though, we're also really interested in expanding to other institutions potentially, especially because with COVID, we have a lot of peers in the department who don't live in Seattle. So for example, there's a postdoc who lives in Tacoma. She's really interested in volunteering, but it would be really hard for her to get to Snoqualmie once a week. So she was someone who was interested in potentially trying to, expand to another institution. So that's definitely something that we're interested in exploring as well. We know that there's, I think, a juvenile detention center in downtown Seattle, maybe. Is that right, Lisa? Yeah, so that's another place we could try to reach out to. So that's definitely something we're interested in working on if that excites you as well. And then Megan, go ahead. Do you want to say what you're thinking?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking like, I know we have a lot of other grad students here that aren't necessarily astrobiology, and we're also like, we want to just do more education outreach in general that like leverages our experience as graduate students and like what you're learning. So like physics students, oceanography, ESS. If you guys want to try to do your own, like, science related themed education outreach at Echo Glen too, we'd obviously be happy to like help and support and bounce ideas and all of that good stuff.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, that's completely true. Someone wants to see the cat, Megan.
I will get him.
All right. The cat's name is Houdini, by the way. Great.
To just piggyback on that a little bit more too. I don't know why I keep forgetting her, the science teacher's name at Echo Glen.
Miss Brown.
Miss Brown, yes. It seems like, we could be as creative as we want with any of these events. We're just trying to find ways to get people interested in doing anything productive and educational, so like we kind of had carte blanche to come up with crazy ideas if we want, and kind of reverse teach, our astrobio, like it's kind of just a broad cultural thing that we can find base level interest in, but other things that apply, geology, earth sciences, oceanography, etc., that like you can come up with anything that might be of interest. It seems like it's fair game. So
thank you, Pete. Yeah, and the really cool thing about this, in my experience so far, is like this is really an outreach vacuum. So this is a place where they're not used to people coming in and being excited to help and work with the students and support the staff. So in general, they're really excited anything we suggest. They're like so grateful to have us there. We're so grateful to be there and be able to help them. It's really cool, and a really unique outreach experience. In my opinion, just based on other stuff I've done and like other young people I've worked with. So if this sounds good to you, and we can definitely talk more about this, obviously, the main way to get started is you'll want to email this echovolunteers@dcyf.wa.gov, and I'll type that into the chat as well. echovolunteers@dcyf.washington.gov. Yes, and you'll basically just say like, "Hi, my name's blah. I would like to become a volunteer at Echo Glen." And then check your spam, because weirdly for UW email, sometimes it goes to spam, but they'll send you something back where they're like, great, here's a link to an electronic background check to fill out. The electronic background check takes maybe like 10 minutes. If you've ever worked with kids before in an official capacity, it's like your typical background check. Sometimes they'll ask like, what your last couple addresses were, stuff like that. And then they'll also give you a volunteer packet to fill out, and it'll look like a really big packet, but mostly it's just a lot of like, these are official policies, sign off that you understand them. And then the only thing that's kind of annoying about this packet is that you need to fill out 3 reference letters. And what this is, it's basically just like one page. You'll give it to the person who's filling out the reference for you, and they'll just like check off some boxes, list some strengths and weaknesses, and then sign off on it. And the important thing is you cannot have family members fill out this reference letter. Megan, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, if it's helpful, I had 3 other grad students do my reference letters. One of them is here, Sam Garza. Thank you for doing my reference letter. And they for all of the people that did mine in weaknesses, they kind of just put like, there's no weaknesses. So it's, it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's not serious at all. I think mainly they just want to make sure you're not a weirdo. And I don't know, I guess because we're grad students, maybe we're like definitionally weirdos, but you know what I mean.
Likewise, I had 3 of my dumb friends do it for me. So it's not like anybody is, they just want you to fill out the paperwork. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but that is like the most annoying, I guess, like bottleneck to the process is just like you have to approach 3 people and ask them to like fill out something about you. But other than that, it's pretty chill. And then usually after like a few weeks or so, you'll get an email that's like, congrats, you're a volunteer now. And then you're on their records. You can basically just show up and they know who you are, and it's all good. So I think that's everything that I had. I would love to just like answer questions now, any concerns you have, whatever you guys would like to learn more about or hear about. And also, yeah, Megan, Pete, Lupita, Lisa, feel free to answer the questions as well.
Oh, just a quick note that they will ask for an attestation once you get everything like approved through the volunteer. They have you send in information regarding your COVID status.
That's usually just like a picture of your vaccine card.
Correct.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add too, I feel like it would be good if after this we could somehow get an idea of who's actually like going to be applying or who still wants time to think of it. So maybe like when you send out the recording of this to the various channels, we could include like some sort of Google form. People wouldn't have a problem filling that out.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Megan. So yeah, if you're interested in joining, please reach out to one of us and I will make sure that the information for contacting us is, in a follow-up message. But yeah, please let us know.
Something I want to be clear about too that might come up as a question is the way that we've been doing this, we started coming once a week per person. That's just kind of how we set it up so that we can build trust with them and everything. I know that some people might not be able to go every week. And so we just recently made sure that they're doing their full teaching program over the summer. And so we wanted to make sure that there is room for more volunteers and everything. Part of what we can do for people who can't show up every week is work on some of the events that we were talking about, some of the more broader educational events or career building events, which they also have. They have people come there and do career talks and stuff. So that might as well be some of us also. So yeah, like none of us have gone, our schedule has just been once a week. That's how we started. But, that's not a fast thing. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of ways to get involved potentially, especially if you're like, well, I don't really like working with kids, but this sounds cool. Like, I think there are ways that, that you could help as well. So don't let that stop you. All right. Any other thoughts from anybody? If not, then let's definitely dive into some questions.
I'll go ahead and chime in with another question. So just me thinking off the top of my head, the 4 of us in this big room, none of us have our own transportation. So if we were to go with you guys, would there be some way? I know you travel in pairs of 2, but you try to make sure that there's always someone who has a car, basically.
Yeah, that's the way we've been doing it so far. And it kind of just worked out really well. We're based on our availabilities and who could drive, that there was an obvious pair and obvious days for that pair to go. But this is another thing that we're really interested in, working on, especially this summer for the fall, is for people who don't have cars, trying to, again, get UW vans, because you can rent vans from UW to do volunteer work. And just making sure we do the paperwork and stuff for that. But definitely we want to make the logistics work for more people to be able to come volunteer.
Yeah, and I think I could add to that too. We could probably do some number larger than 2, but lower than some very large number. Maybe we could do up to 4 people going at once on a day. So I would say if transportation is your worry, don't let that stop you from signing up, because we will find a way to make it work.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you might feel like, well, like fall quarter is going to be really busy for me, but maybe winter quarter. Do the forms now, do the background check now, just get on their records. It doesn't hurt. You'll be able to start volunteering whenever you want, and then there will be nothing in your way when you're ready to start volunteering. And even if you're having like an off quarter where you can't be going, definitely still come to our weekly update and information meetings where we organize stuff and talk about stuff. There are a lot of ways to be involved, even if, you're having a quarter where you don't feel like you can commit to tutoring. So just want to address some questions in the chat too. So Debbie asked, how do y'all typically coordinate with one another and support each other in this process? Okay, so on a practical level, in terms of coordination, we have these weekly meetings where we go over updates, talk about any issues or concerns people are having. And then for like getting there, the way we've done it is like, usually Megan and I go on Fridays, like Megan's like the driver. And so we'll text each other and be like, want to get Starbucks, or like, when should you come pick me up? And that way it, helps keep the Slack channel not too clogged up and makes things less painful for everybody else. And I think similarly, Pete and Lupita are a pair that go together and they communicate over text about getting to the facility together. In terms of supporting each other, that's sort of a different question, right? And I think we tried to take time in these meetings to like talk about stuff like, did your student have a problem this week that, you weren't sure how to talk about, or, other things like that, other than just, sort of the practical things that come up.
As well as I would add to that, for Lupita and I who've been working in the maximum security cottage, we generally at our weeklies check in with each other, just make sure that we're comfortable in the classroom or the people that we've been working with, anything that might come up, so that we're making sure that, we're doing okay while we're there too, and that it's not becoming a burden on us in any way. So right now our weekly meetings has been like 1 o'clock on Mondays. Again, just happenstance. It's what worked for us when we started. But yeah, we talk a lot on the Slack and, kind of checking in with each other a lot. So.
Yeah, definitely. Emma asked, maybe you mentioned this already, but how do you match with a student? So this is another thing that feels pretty informal right now. Basically, we just talk to Laurel or Pam about what students are asking for help. And then, they'll talk to that student and say, oh, well, we have someone who could come work with you. And then you'll just start working with that student. But yeah, Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that sometimes you're sort of in a bit of a nebulous regime of like, do I really have a set student I'm working with? Like for the last couple of weeks, like the student that I was working with since I started there was released. And then for a couple of weeks, they sort of have me floating around to different students, just whoever happened to need help that day. So I think it's really just about being flexible.
Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about that too, though, is especially if you're tutoring in a classroom, even if you're not working with the other students, they get to know you. They see your face. They start to recognize you. And so then they feel more okay asking for help too, because you're a friendly face. Miles, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess kind of related to that question. So typically how long do you tend to mentor a particular student?
Yeah, so I mean, in an extreme case, we had a student, K John, who we started working with, and then when we started working with him, we knew he was going to be released very soon. So I think we started working with him in February, and his release date was in mid-March. And so he had a very specific goal of getting through a certain amount of his geometry content before he had to leave. And so in that case, we only had a month with him because he knew he was going to be leaving soon. On the opposite side of that, my student Sebastian is supposed to be at Echo Glen for another 2 years. And so I'm prepared to work with him as long as I live in Seattle. But yeah, again, it's this weird flexibility thing though. Sometimes they get moved around to different facilities, stuff happens. And I think our goal right now is to just be for them while they're there, and we can be there for them. If that helps.
Okay, and then I'm assuming that you're mentoring multiple students at once, typically?
So I've usually just worked with Sebastian when I show up.
Okay.
And then, normally we'll get in the classroom and Megan, for example, after K John left, we'll just ask the para, who needs help today? And so Megan has worked with a student named Jesus before on a one-off day. Who was the other student you worked with recently?
I worked with James on health and wellness, which was the sex education module. So that was a bit of a tough day.
Lupita?
Yeah, I'll just add that it kind of depends. I've worked with multiple kids at the facility, given what the volunteer needs were that given day. So I've worked in multiple cottages with multiple students. Right now in Max Security, we work with whoever wants to work on math that day. So that can be one kid, that can be 5. So it kind of depends, but we're usually there for, at least Pete and I go in the mornings from 8 to 10. So we're there for 2 hours. If that gives more context as well.
And to address a little bit of both Miles and Emma there, you know, it wasn't necessarily like there was some matchmaking process when I started down in Max Security, but and it is volatile. You know, people's legal situations can change at the drop of a hat, and you kind of don't know. It is very cool when you do know that there's somebody who's going to be there for a while. So Chris is a student we're working with in Maximum Security who also has a long-term stay. He's really interested in becoming a computer science major and going to college. And so he has kind of longer-term math goals and interests that are something that we're starting to build off now. He's only working on Algebra 2 and geometry packets on paper right now. He's really interested in calculus and everything. So we kind of been going through his packets, but talking about broader applications and like where some of these things fall in my grad program and stuff. So that's a kind of cool situation where it's a lot longer term and we can kind of work through things and build interest. But some of them, yeah, I've been working with somebody for like 2 weeks and then they're gone, or it's just they need to hustle up and finish this one classwork and that's kind of their main need at that point. So you know, it takes a lot of patience and just sort of like us being flexible to deal with all of that. But I think that's what makes it such a cool environment, honestly, is being able to figure out how to connect with people in these different time scales, I guess.
Yeah, can't emphasize enough, like flexibility is the biggest thing that will benefit you the most if you want to volunteer at Echo Glen, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
To just also, just to give an example that I kind of shared with Lupita as I was starting in there, and then I think that we've kind of has informed how we do things. We were kind of working as a team almost, like Lupita and I are each working with one person, but we're maybe sitting at the same table and trying to set up a healthy way for them to all of a sudden start comparing and talking with each other and, you know, getting sort of healthy competition going. It's really hard to find motivation when, you know, you're a prisoner and it might not matter if you finish your algebra class. So this, you know, we have to exercise some creativity and empathy and figure out what's gonna get through that packet. You know, there's not really any incentives. So, you know, that's scary, but it's also, I feel like, a really cool way for us to all kind of explore different teaching methods that we can use and really find these personal connections. And I spent an hour and a half talking to this kid about diamonds one day because he was like, I don't want to do my math, but we wanted to, you know, I found something interesting science-wise to talk with him about that sparked him, and then he wouldn't stop talking about it, you know. But that's just as valuable as sitting there working on the homework. You know, you spend a day just being like, even if we don't get through any of the problems today, sitting there talking about it, you know, so we can kind of unhinge our minds from how our school works and also realize that it might not matter if we like are really just hammering out the work when we're there. So a lot of different versions of that have showed up, but I think that's the rewarding thing about it for me.
I love that, Pete. Yeah, I feel like for me, like the tutoring is really just like a pretext to get to like work with these kids and like talk to them and learn about their interests and stuff. Like I've definitely had days with my students where they're just like, I feel bad. Like I don't feel like working on my stupid online class. And we'll just sit there and talk about it. And to me, that day is a success just as much as a day where we get a lot of their coursework done.
So I had another question. So I guess like the students that are I guess possibly transitioning to essentially like complete their like complete their requirements, do they have access to like SAT, ACT like tools or anything like that? I'm assuming not, but yeah, what's your experience?
So, great question. Would love if other people chimed in on this too. But there's stuff in the library, and as far as I know, they're allowed to take stuff out from the library. That being said, the stuff in the library is just like you would expect it would be, super outdated, falling apart. They could really, I think, use some better supplies. And so that's one of the things we want to use our fancy Autodesk money for, is to buy materials like that, especially like PSAT, SAT, ACT stuff for the library. GED, yeah, that stuff too, for sure. But yeah, great question.
Thank you. Oh yeah, this is my DOS guy.
Oh,
She's kind of blurry because of the filter, because of the background. She's going in and out of being blurry.
Yeah, Miles, we were checking out like books from the library that we could maybe bring down to the maximum security cottage, because they can't really, quite move around so much. So we're kind of digging out, they've got like a practice SAT book with like some triangle geometry in it. So we're like, oh, that might be useful, but it's limited so far. There was only one math book in the maximum security cottage. But yeah, it's really nice that we have this money so that we can kind of, even on a student by student basis, Chris, the guy I was mentioning who wants to learn calculus, like he said he had asked for a calculus book for Christmas or something like that. So there's certainly, at the level we're at, we can maybe even individually get things that might help a certain person because we have the money too. And if we can find the cheap resource for it. So like not everybody might be learning calculus, but we probably have the money or some way to get Chris help with that.
I just wanted to chime in here and actually talk about the funding a little bit, just because I know that we haven't talked like specifically about it. As Sam and Pete pointed out, a portion of the funding was directly allocated to buying reference materials based on what we think the program needs the most, including like with input from the counselors and the teachers there. A portion of the money was also allocated to student requested books. And so we're going to need to work with the library in order to give them access to that funding, but that way students can actually ask for their own like books that they want and need, whether it's for school or for fun. And then we also have a portion of the money that is going to like infrastructure for our group. So like website costs, and we still need to talk more about this, but potentially a Slack, because I know now we're going to maybe have graduate students that aren't on the astrobiology Slack. And so we'll need to fix that. So, but anyway, so if you want to like help support us, but maybe don't want to go tutor and you know how to set up a website, that would be that would be great. So just like, yeah, so that's what the funding situation looks like. And we like overestimated the funding we need for transportation. So we are ready to support more people going.
Okay, and I also have just like one more question. So, what are some of the supplies that the students like come in with? Like, do they have adequate supplies, like notebook, paper, like everything that they possibly need?
Nope. Great question. They aren't allowed to have basically anything. So like calculators, the teacher has to provide them with that. Paper, pencils, the teacher has to give them that. And we're like technically not allowed to like pass them anything, or they're not allowed to pass anything to each other. I'm not supposed to pass notes, not supposed to pass supplies. Yeah, and again, I think Megan pointed this out earlier, that like there's not like a reference book that they have to use for a class either.
Yeah, like when I was doing geometry, it was really difficult because he wasn't allowed to have like a compass or a protractor. What they let me have was plastic and janky. And only I got to use it. And so it worked out because he had to get it done quickly. And so I said, hey, I'll do all the drawing, you do the rest. I was like, they won't let you have it anyway. So it's kind of strange that they don't have access to the materials that he needed. Like he couldn't do the packets without them, but it's like they weren't even prepared for it. So yeah.
To be specific, they had described an escape attempt with using notes being passed through a trash can, where people were writing stuff and then dropping it in a trash can, and then others were coming by. So I mean, there's like all these things going on there that we don't see any of, and so they're like sort of, you show up and be like, we're not doing that this week or whatever, and you just kind of don't know why. So we're just trying to like, we've been ears open while we're there and try to figure out like why some of the things operate the way that they do, and kind of picking up these stories as we go, because a lot of it wasn't told to us up front or anything like that. And so yeah, it's really tough for the Max Security kids. They have their paper packet for the geometry, and they can get a pencil from the security person there, and I have to bring the calculator down or whatever, and that's it, right? So yeah, there's all kinds of reasons for things that we're not privy to or whatever, and then we kind of are finding out on the fly.
Yeah, like I was still bummed that we can't bring them like presents and treats and like motivational things. Is really, they're very kind of anti making them feel special. It's like you can't basically make anybody feel special. So they all have to be kind of treated the same.
Yeah, we've discussed that we might, be changing some internal dynamics there that we also aren't aware of when we're not there and tutoring. And so if we are seeming to show favoritism to some students or something like that, that could set off things that are happening when we're not there between them. Fight, I mean, you name it, we just don't know. So we have to be really careful about like, yeah, neutrally doing things, I guess.
Yeah, so related to that, I've tried, like, I basically always work with Sebastian when I go, but I've tried, like, after we're done for the day, like, I'll walk around the classroom and just, like, see how everybody else is doing, and make it clear that I don't have, like, loyalty to any particular student. I'm just there to help, and I think that helps too.
All right, thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, thanks for asking. They're really good questions. It's past 5. If you have to go, that's fine. Just make sure you look out for a message from us. As long as everyone else is okay with it though, like we can stick around and answer more questions or talk about your thoughts or concerns.
I have to take off right now, but I really want to thank everybody for coming. I'm super stoked that we have this show out here. We're really happy about this thing that we've been doing. And so yeah, thank you all for coming. I hope we see you again.
I have a question quickly too.
Yeah, I'll stick around. Go ahead.
Okay, great. It's great that you guys got some money from Autodesk. Do you guys are you like applying to any other grants, and do you have like a list of grants that you would like to, go for? I'm assuming that you guys, the money from Autodesk was like grant money of some sort.
Yeah, I think it was like technically like a gift or something. So basically, it's like, I think someone said like carte blanche to basically do whatever we wanted, which was cool.
Okay, nice.
But there's other stuff on our radar too. Like I know there are like UW internal grants we can apply for. A lot of us work for a lab called the Virtual Planetary Laboratory in astronomy and astrobiology. And there's potentially some money there for outreach. I think because we're still in such like a since we're in such like a preliminary stage, I think we would really want to like have an idea in mind to motivate asking for more money. So I think like the need would need to like present itself, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. That's you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, we're still sort of like seeing how things go. But if we needed more money, yes, we would apply to more grants for sure.
Yeah. And then the second question, which is just kind of more logistical, is are there any particular colors that you shouldn't wear to tutoring?
I haven't had any problems. I don't know. I mean, it's like a thing that like the students have laughed about among themselves too, because I think adults are always like, are they wearing gang colors? Are they wearing gang colors? And the thing is like, if you like, there's enough gangs in the world that any color could be a gang. Like, I think it's like a very like,
yeah, but regionally, right?
Sorry.
I mean, but regionally, right? I mean, I worked at with a similar group in California, and we were not allowed to wear specific colors when we went into tutor. So I was just wondering about here.
Yeah, in my experience, it's not a thing. They've never said anything about. I mean, the only thing I've ever heard them say about clothes is they made fun of the teacher's sneakers once, and we're like, "What are those?" That's all I've ever heard them say.
Yeah, I mean, consciously, I personally try to wear like a UW sweatshirt or something like UW related. That's just kind of what I usually. That's what I've worn when I've gone there. Is just sort of worn something UW, but yeah, other than that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Lucas?
Hey, yeah. So you're saying like consistency and stuff is really important. I was just wondering, how do you like if you know that there's going to be a week, you have something else, you're going to be away, just wondering how you like typically handle that. Do you have someone else fill in or?
Completely. Yeah, I think we try to do that. And then also we just try to let them know, and with as much advance notice as we can possibly give them. Like, and like at the end of the day, I'll say, like, when we're done working together, I'll just be like, I'll see you next week, or I'm not going to be here next week because of blah, but this person will be there, or I'll see you the week after. And I think that like stuff comes up, and there have been weeks where we weren't allowed to come to tutor because of like COVID, or, you know, occasionally the cottage will be in like lockdown because there was a fight or something, or, you know, my student isn't allowed to go to the classroom today for whatever, for like behavioral reasons or something. But yeah, just to try to like keep the line of communication as open as you possibly can, even though like obviously we can't like text them or email them or something. So yeah, just like when you're done working with them for the day, let them know when you're going to see them next. And I think that's totally okay.
Okay, cool.
All right. I think Lucas, you're the only person left. So if you have another question.
I get, oh, Debbie's here.
Oh,
never mind.
No, Debbie's gone now.
Debbie's gone.
Okay. Well, actually, I did have a question about just like the emailing process for this slide that you have up. So would it just like, should we say something like, hi, I'm trying to join this existing group like eSteam and as a volunteer, or like, would they know that?
Yeah, so no, they won't, because again, super disorganized, super not a lot of communication. Literally all you have to tell them is like, I would like to become a volunteer.
Okay.
Just say like, this is my name, I want to be a volunteer. And then it's almost like an automated email reply is kind of the vibe, and they'll send you back the materials to fill out and everything. But
Okay.
it's not super important what you say, just to like, you know, get the email to them, you know, get on their records and stuff.
Cool.
Megan, do you have something to say?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. You sat up like you had thought of something. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to call you out. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Lucas. I think if a couple people can just like stick behind for a minute so we can talk about just next steps real quick.
I'm going to stop the recording. Sound good?
Sound good? Yes.